We've always described the European countries as vassals of the United States, the Western European countries. But now that the US itself is taking a different direction completely, they seem to be completely at a loss, like
Yeah.
chickens with their head cut off, just running around. How does this work, this relationship work? Because if they don't have their master, we talk about the unipolar moment. The unipolar moment is the United States. If the US itself is recognizing that we're moving away from unipolarity to a multipolar world, it's kind of odd that the Europeans are just sitting there by themselves, like, wait, we are still the unipolar hegemon. We are Western hegemony, even though the message coming from Washington D.C. is contrary to that. So, how
Yeah.
does that work? What's
Yeah, no,
happening?
it's quite an extraordinary set of circumstances. Um, and one of the immediate reactions, well, it came in Zelensky's speech, which followed. I think it was the day after Vance's speech, and he went on and on about the need for Europe. He was careful not to insult the U.S. or Trump. He had enough sense. He understood that that would be a mistake. But he was essentially saying, look, we're in this together now. Europe has to draw together. It has to be united. And he suggested that they create their own army, a European army, a multinational army. Now NATO is an assemblage of many different national armies, and but he was suggesting that there should be. You say, well, we can do it together. But and you're hearing the same kind of calls from European leaders, from the usual suspects like Macron and Keir Starmer. Um, but that's just not going to work. Let's be honest. Even with the U.S. fully involved, Ukraine has been losing this war, and they're losing it more and more rapidly. Because even all the arsenal of the U.S. and of Europe has been pretty much emptied to support Ukraine, and now we're down to there are no more stockpiles. Again, we're drawing from monthly production, and that's just very meager, and it's completely outproduced by Russia. So even with the U.S. involved, they can't do it. They're not able to hold the line. So how possibly could they do it? I, they're in economic trouble. Their populations are growing increasingly skeptical or even resentful of this Ukraine project. How are they going to do it? I don't think they can. But so they're just, they're pretending that they can. We'll do it. But um, I think they have a profound identity crisis because they've been uh, they assumed that they were faithful servants, faithful devotees of this religion of the international rules-based order. Uh, but now their leader, it appears anyway, it's still early, but it appears that he is abandoning them. He doesn't really like them. I think he's made that clear, and wants to shift resources away. Not just end the flow of arms to Ukraine, but maybe pull troops out of NATO. Um, I don't, they're in a state of shock and of fury, and in some cases they're breaking down in tears, as the organizer of the Munich Security Conference did, the one who introduced Vance. At the end, he had to give the final speech, the kind of the farewell address, and he broke down in tears at the end of his speech, just as he was talking about their beloved rules-based international order. So on one level, they, it's the thing that they have identified themselves appears to be breaking apart. That's quite traumatic. Now, so what are they going to do? Is there going to be a European army? I don't think so, to be honest. Poland has already spoken against it, and Poland would actually be able to contribute probably more than any other Western European country. But they're not Western European, but a European country. Um, but now they've called together or convened these emergency conferences, or meetings. One in Paris, Macron did, and I think Italy, Germany, the UK, Poland, and apparently some other countries are going to be there too. And then a similar conference has been convened in Brussels, by the EU leadership. Um, and so far you don't see any signs like waking up. Wait a second, maybe we should listen to Vance. Maybe he has something to say, or maybe this whole thing was stupid. You're not hearing any of that. There's just sort of a circling of the wagons and this insistence that, yeah, we're Europe. And this is what we're about. Okay, our leader has at least temporarily forsaken us, but we will remain true to our cause. Um, yeah, I noticed like the contrast between the reception to Vance's speech, which was met generally with silence, I think shocked silence, and Zelensky's speech. His was punctuated by applause, all the old cliches that just made him feel so good. This is what these conferences were about. You get together and you just repeat the old cliches, even when things are obviously the policy that you adopted didn't work, but you don't question it. That's not allowed. That's a Russian talking point or whatever. So you just repeat the cliches and people feel good. They get that warm, fuzzy feeling and they applaud. And they had that with Zelensky. But looking at it, you just had to know that somewhere deep down they said this isn't working, but they just don't know where to go. Yeah, by the way, Zelensky started off his speech with talking about the drone attack on the Chernobyl nuclear power plant and said, this is what the Russians do. And then like just a few minutes later, he started talking about the North Koreans. And so this is the guy that your savior, the guy that, or at least he's not their savior, but the kind of your raison d'être, it's for him that you're fighting. It's for him that you're making all these sacrifices. The charlatan. Well, so yeah, what's going to happen to Europe? Yeah, this is if the U.S. It's not a certain thing. Sometimes, I've seen it in the past, but maybe things really will be different now. That Trump will go charging off in one direction and then reverse himself, or the thing will fall apart. But it looks like he's got some serious people around him, like Vance. Right, who are pushing this. So this is different this time. Now he does have some, I guess he's the president. Before he didn't even have any generals that really agreed with him. Now he has some generals. He has leaders around him who are willing to at least carry out his vision. So what happens to Europe? One possibility, well, maybe they could wake up and take the practical route, and just say, look, we've done some stupid things. There actually are some people are now talking about, hey, maybe this could be good. We could get cheap energy again and revitalize our industries. Maybe it's the time to actually realize that initial vision that, of a European superpower, that's independent of the U.S. and can be there, one of the great poles in this multipolar world. And you aren't quite hearing that yet, but that's maybe they could go down that route. The other possibility is they could just retreat more deeply into their own delusions. Part of like what we've talked about is a sense of moral purity. To explain their behavior, when the consequences of their actions were so destructive, to themselves, like the cutting off gas in general, the energy links between themselves and Russia. It makes no practical sense, no economic sense, but it's sort of a matter of moral purity. I'm reminded of, I think it was a statement, I'm sure it was more than one person, but in the Swedes some years ago started to refer themselves to it as a moral superpower. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe our industry is dying and our master has abandoned us, but we're the moral superpower. And they could just go, kind of cling. And I'm sure some of them are that seems to be the initial reaction. They're trying to hang on to that. But I don't know how long it's going to work. At some point, it's just reality has a way of breaking in. And these various populist groups may eventually, carry out a revolution in Europe. We'll see. But and it'll be harder. I'd have to say the establishment, if indeed, the U.S. pulls away, the establishment there is going to be greatly weakened. That's part of what gave them strength, was the support from the U.S. that they could always rely on, and now they can't rely on it anymore. So it looks better for, let's say, the revolutionaries, so-called, in Europe now.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. I promise to only take 1 minute of your time. If you're using AI, please consider checking out my website, novlisky.io. So what we built here at Novlisky is an AI hub. It allows you to access hundreds of AI models. We update them as soon as a new model comes out. It is integrated into our system, and you can use them all under one platform. And another thing that's so great about this website is that you can easily use multiple models at the same time to compare which is best for whatever use case. So for example, I'm going to use Anthropic and GPT-4 at the same time. So I get side-by-side results. I use this in my work every single day. I think you'll find it incredibly useful. There's tons of customizations. We have an iOS and Android native app as well. So you have seamless synchronization across all devices. So please check it out. I think it's something you'll find incredibly useful. There are no subscription fees, no rate limits. I guarantee you it's going to save you money, and it's just going to keep you on top of all AI releases.
Right. Right. I think there seems to be a general acknowledgement, though, that this is kind of the end, because just you say about the person that organized the conference crying at the end in his farewell. There's been talks just saying that we have to acknowledge that there is a divorce between Europe and the U.S. in terms of our fundamental values, I believe is what they said. And so this is, in a sense, kind of an acknowledgement that things are different. And in the short term, maybe they're thinking, like you said, they're ideologues. They're going to go down with the ship, that this is it. But really, Western hegemony is over. They're going to go down with it instead of making a change. But there's going to be, clearly, I believe this will give huge support to the opposition parties, to the AfD, to Gorgescu in Romania, probably the National Rally, because all of a sudden the whole basis of the EU establishment was that we were part of this rules-based order led by the United States. Like we said, now they're like chickens with their heads cut off. They just have to run around desperately throwing together these little conferences, doing kind of crazy last gasp type of actions. Keir Starmer was saying that potentially the UK would be sending 25,000 troops to Ukraine. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
And so this type of activity just seems like the actions of a dying ideology right now in Europe.
Uh-huh.
This is all they have left, so they just have to try something. But it's done. I just imagine in the next couple of years, as these elections come on, all these establishment parties will lose pretty heavily at the ballot box because their leader's gone. That's
it. Yeah, no, it is a great blow to the establishment there. One thing they could rely on is we've had this American-led system ever since the end of World War II, and that's what's made they can make the argument. That's what made us prosperous. Let's not change anything. We need to follow our American leaders. Now, of course, it's become more extreme in the last couple of decades. And places like, countries like France used to exercise a fair amount of independence. So it's a more recent phenomenon, the subservience to the U.S. in France. And it's become more extreme everywhere. But I think in general, like sort of the average citizen, the one who votes for a center-right or a center-left party and is afraid of these rising opposition parties, their thinking is like, my parents and my grandparents, they always voted for this party because this has been safe, it's been good for Europe, and America's leadership has been good for Europe. I think clearly it hasn't been good for Europe in the last several years, but that's it's just that there's this inertia, these really deep, long, this relationship and this trust that's been engendered is something that goes over generations, and it just doesn't disappear overnight, or even in a matter of years sometimes. But this will be a blow to it, because if America really does leave in a significant way, those average citizens, that again always vote for the establishment parties, I think they now have a license to actually look at the Populist Party and say it's just like the old order has fallen. I was always supporting the old order. I just didn't want to hear any criticism of it. But it's gone. So what are these people really representing anymore? They're talking this crazy talk about us being a moral superpower, or they won't use that language exactly, but I think that's part of what they're doing. Or we're going to create our own army or something. It's all a lot of nonsense, and I think a lot of people will see through it.